Raylene, welcome with all of us here. Dr. Raylene Phillips is the president of APPPAH, the Association for Prenatal and Perinatal Psychology and Health. She's a neonatologist dedicated to newborns' physical and emotional well-being. After raising 3 children, she earned a master's in developmental psychology, became a NIDCAP, which is a certified preterm infant development specialist. Later, she attended medical school at UC Davis. So she completed her pediatric residency and neonatology fellowship at Loma Linda University, where she's now an attending neonatologist, medical director of neonatal services, and pediatric department chair. It's not finished. A fellow of the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine. She's an IBCLC, an international board-certified lactation consultant. She focuses on newborn care and parent-baby bonding. Welcome, Raylene. The title of your presentation today is The Impact of Immediate Postpartum Care on the Psyche of Mother and Child.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm going to share my screen. I am so happy to be with you to help celebrate World Pregnancy Day. And let's see here, I want to change this. And to discuss the impacts of immediate postpartum care on the psyche of mother and child. This is a passion of mine, and I'm very, very happy to be able to share it with you. Well, I learned a great deal about mother-infant bonding and attachment during my graduate studies in developmental psychology. That was my chosen focus. Neither my textbooks nor my professors acknowledged the mind or psyche of babies. It's all about the mother. My introduction to the psyche of babies came almost entirely from APPPAH. As we all know, the Association for Prenatal and Perinatal Psychology and Health. Now, while APPPAH has been an active organization for over 40 years, since 1983, I only found APPPAH 17 years ago in 2008. But what I have learned has had a profound impact on my personal and professional perspectives about babies before and after birth. And I have learned from many of you on this this Zoom meeting as well. And I just want to thank you for all your contributions to this work. APPPAH is in the midst of celebrating Birth Psychology Month through the month of March, and we are thrilled to join you today in celebrating World Pregnancy Day. You can access recordings of all the events throughout this month and what is coming during the rest of the month by going to www.birthpsychology.com, and we welcome you to join us in that. In the modern world, as if we have so eloquently heard from Laura, the focus of Suzanne, the focus of medical professionals who care for mothers during pregnancy, labor, and birth is almost entirely about the mother's physical well-being. Mother's mental or mental health or the well-being of her psyche is often only a secondary focus. Yet, a pregnant mother's mental well-being has direct effects on the development of her baby in the womb, with physical, neurobiological, and psychological effects. The mental health of pregnant mothers is now receiving much more attention in perinatal research, and Catherine Monk is one of the leaders in this, and especially on the effects of maternal anxiety during pregnancy on birth outcomes and on the baby's brain development. We know that unborn babies are exposed to mother's emotional states through hormones in her bloodstream, but we also have evidence that unborn babies are very aware of their mothers and recognize their voice and respond to their touch. In this study, the heart rate variability of the fetus was monitored in response to its mother's communicating directly with her unborn baby, either vocally or silently, compared to the mother talking about the baby to another adult. Increased heart rate variability is an indicator of well-being and lower stress. And as you can see, the heart rate variability increased significantly whenever the mother communicated, either with the fetus or when talking to another adult about the fetus. But the heart rate variability increased significantly more when mothers communicated directly with their unborn baby than it did when mothers communicated about the baby to another adult nearby, indicating that the unborn baby can tell the difference. Interestingly, when the mothers communicated directly with the baby in her womb, the effect was the same whether she spoke out loud or silently in her mind. We know that many children have conscious memories of their birth and even before birth, and many adults have unconscious memories of birth and before, which can be retrieved when the subconscious is accessed through the use of hypnosis. Stories about the capacity of babies to have memories before and after birth are shared by authors from multiple professional perspectives, including Dr. Thomas Verney, Dr. David Chamberlain, Dr. Wendy Ann McCarty, Elizabeth and Neil Carmen, Drs. Arthur Janoff and Peter Nathaniels, John Chitty and Dr. Aletha Solter, Dr. Miriam Chazet, and many, many more, including those of you on this call. But we really don't need books to tell us that babies are intelligent, conscious, and aware. When we look into the eyes of a stable, non-traumatized baby immediately after a gentle birth, we can see the intelligence in their eyes, their alert awareness as they assess this new world, their intense gaze into their mother's eyes, even while getting their first meal, their curious focus. When they get a chance, they can focus just as intently on father. We can see the joy of being next to mother outside the womb and just looking into mother's face or seeing dad's face for the first time. We can see the total contentment of being skin to skin with mother immediately after birth, and the blissful peace at being with mother outside the womb. We can also look into the eyes of premature babies who should still be inside their mother's womb to understand that babies are just as conscious and aware before birth. As a neonatologist who cares for infants born very prematurely, I see evidence every day in the neonatal intensive care unit that babies are intelligent, conscious, and aware before they were meant to be born. And they have the same capabilities at birth and after birth. So how does this knowledge change the ways in which we interact with pregnant mothers and their unborn babies? It changes everything, including immediate postpartum care. Being skin to skin with mother immediately after and continuously after birth is where all newborn mammals want to be. Everywhere you look in nature, mothers and babies are as close together as they can get. So let's look at some of the ways why this is probably not just a happy coincidence. There are many benefits of uninterrupted skin to skin immediately after birth, but those that immediately come to mind include that it improves physiologic stability for both mother and baby, it increases maternal bonding behaviors, it protects the baby from the negative effects of separation, it supports optimal infant brain development, and it increases breastfeeding rates and durations. Today, I'm going to focus briefly on the 3 benefits that directly relate to the psyche of mother and baby. Let's start with how uninterrupted skin to skin immediately after birth increases maternal bonding behaviors. Until the moment the cord is cut, mother and baby are literally a single biological organism. And until several months after birth, the mother-baby dyad can be thought of as a single psychobiological organism. Yet they each have their own psyche that interacts with each other in multiple and complex ways. Let's look at how mother's psyche is affected by immediate skin-to-skin care of her baby. Bonding and attachment can begin well before birth, we know, but birth is when mother and baby get to meet each other for the first time outside the womb. Mother-infant bonding is so important for survival of the newborn that nature has not left it to chance. Biochemical activators in our brain's reward circuitry trigger maternal caregiving, and these activators are all increased by skin-to-skin contact. Oxytocin is one such hormone that has been well studied, and it is often called the love hormone, but it's actually the ultimate multitasker because it contracts the uterus, reducing the risk of hemorrhage, releases mother's breast milk, and increases maternal relaxation, caregiving behaviors, bonding, facial recognition, and attraction. And all of these maternal behaviors are important for the survival of the newborn, and all are increased in the mother by skin-to-skin contact with her new baby. Multiple studies during the 1970s and 80s examined the effects of early postpartum skin-to-skin contact. The standard practice at that time was for mothers to briefly view their newborns at birth, and babies were then brought to the nursery while mothers recovered from birth and were brought to mothers every 4 hours for feedings. Some of us remember this with our own babies. In these studies, the novel intervention was a brief period of skin-to-skin contact immediately after birth, before the babies were taken to the nursery. And with as little as 15 minutes of immediate skin-to-skin contact, the study mothers were found to be more comfortable at the time of hospital discharge in handling their newborns. They were more relaxed with their babies and smiled at them more often than did the mothers whose babies had been immediately taken away, as was the usual practice. In these studies, the study results lasted well beyond the neonatal period. At 3 months, mothers who had immediate skin-to-skin contact after birth spent more time kissing their babies and looking at their faces. At 1 year, they held and touched their babies more often and had more positive speaking interactions than did mothers who had not spent time with their babies immediately after birth. They kept more follow-up appointments and had increased breastfeeding durations. And more recent study confirmed that maternal and infant effects of early uninterrupted skin-to-skin are still apparent 1 year later. And these include more positive mother-infant interactions and increased infant self-regulation, all as a result of the first few minutes and hours after birth. Uninterrupted skin-to-skin immediately after birth also protects the baby from the negative effects of separation from mother. Gallagher writes that mother and offspring live in a biological state that has much in common with addiction. And when they are parted, the infant does not just miss its mother, it experiences a physical and psychological withdrawal from a host of her sensory stimuli, not unlike the plight of a heroin addict who quits cold turkey. This analogy helps us to understand why a baby protests with such vigor when separated from mother. Indeed, from the baby's perspective, separation from mother is life-threatening. Protest is the universal mammalian infant response to separation. It is an instinctive response to being in the wrong place, outside the newborn's natural habitat, which is mother's body. It could be a dangerous experience for newborns to be away from mother's body, which is their source of warmth, nutrition, and safety. In any other place, there is a danger of freezing, starving, or being eaten by a predator. So all baby mammals instinctively protest with loud cries and intense activity. If you've ever been around newborn puppies or kittens, you know this is true for other species of mammals as well, and it's been so well documented, without a doubt, in all newborn research. The purpose of this protest is to attract mother's attention so she can notice and rescue them from the dangers of being away from her immediate presence. There's a common myth that crying is good for newborns. I've even heard some say, keep them crying, it opens up their lungs. But it actually takes a very brief cry to open the lungs of a newborn, and continued frantic crying actually impairs normal lung functioning. It increases intracranial pressure. It jeopardizes the closure of the foramen valley in the heart and initiates a cascade of stress reactions. Dr. Christensen from the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden, found that babies separated from their mothers after birth had 10 times the number of cries and 40 times the duration of crying as babies who were skin-to-skin with their mothers immediately after birth. Despair is the universal mammalian infant response to prolonged separation from mother. The baby gives up and crying eventually stops. Intense movement ceases and the infant becomes still. This is also instinctive behavior. This time, the purpose is to avoid attracting attention. Like the fawn in the forest, the baby becomes very quiet and very still. When babies stop crying after prolonged separation, it is not because they are now okay with it. It's simply a survival technique, and all systems slow down for prolonged survival. Temperature drops, heart rate decreases, and metabolism slows. And for some infants, we see this process tips them over the edge, and we see hypothermia, bradycardia, or hypoglycemia. Now, protest by itself is not harmful to the developing brain unless it is prolonged and repetitive, but despair is harmful to the developing brain. The baby monkey in the picture on the left has been separated from its mother for 3 days, and entire symposiums have been devoted to studying the association between maternal-infant separation and depression. This was such a concern in the world of animal research that a report was published by the Scientific Committee on Animal Health and Welfare in 2002, entitled The Welfare of Non-Human Primates Used in Research. The report documents the profound impact of separation from the mother in the infant primate, the biphasic response of protest and despair, the physiological disturbances in the regulation of heart rate and temperature and sleep patterns, cortisol secretion, and the immune system. The recommendation for research primates was that there be no separation from mothers for 6 to 18 months. Otherwise, the research monkeys became unable to tolerate normal touch, became pathologically violent in adolescence, and totally unfit for further research, which is a sobering conclusion and food for much thought. Hundreds of research studies have used maternal-infant separation of animals to study the effects of stress on various organ systems. In this study, piglets were separated from their mothers for only 2 hours a day, and on days 12 and 56, weight and behaviors were measured, as well as immune, hormonal, and brain parameters. Results showed a significant decrease in weight and immune function and an increase in stress hormones and the receptors, indicating both functional and structural changes in the brain. Baby rodents who were separated from their mothers by only 10 minutes twice daily on days 8 and 10 were found to have changes in brain function in the hippocampus and the amygdala. And they found that there were fewer changes if the baby rodents could hear their mother's voices in the same room than if they were completely separated out of sight, sound, and touch. And these brain changes were found to persist into adulthood. In this 2009 study of mare-foal attachment, the authors make a case that horses may be a better model for studies on maternal-infant attachment than in animals with litters, because horses usually only have a single offspring. They show early preferential bonding and attachment behaviors, and they have faster development, going from birth to adolescence in only 12 months. In this study, control animals were left undisturbed with mother after birth until the first suckling. But the experimental animals were handled by a human, gently but firmly, in mother's presence for 1 hour before being allowed to get up and suckle. What they found was perfectly analogous to the protest and despair response described in primate research. The newborn foals initially struggled and trembled and had increased respirations. Clearly, they were stressed. Then they became motionless, but maintained high tone with no relaxation. After their release in an hour, their first standing was delayed, as was their first suckling, and they often had inappropriate suckling patterns at first, chewing on the teat or making suckling motions into the air or towards the human handler. Then all the animals from both groups were kept in the same pasture and observed for any differences in their behavior. The experimental foals showed many signs of insecure attachment. They stayed much closer to their mothers, they played less with their peers, they were less curious about novel objects in the pasture, and most disturbing, they were more aggressive with their peers. At 7 months, when they were weaned with a temporary separation, the experimental foals were less adaptable to change, protesting much longer than foals who were not handled at birth. And after a year, now in their adolescence, when they were permanently separated from their mothers, they found that the experimental foals still kept more distance from their peers and continued to show more aggressive behaviors, all from just 1 hour of interrupting mother and baby's connections immediately after birth. Dr. Graven, a neonatologist who specializes in developmental care of newborns, reminds us that it is a serious mistake to assume that the principles derived from careful animal studies do not apply to human infants. The risk of suppression or disruption of needed neural processes is very significant and potentially can last a lifetime.
Raylene, we would need some time for questions and answers. If you can, like, say now we have 2, 3 minutes, and then we have time for one question.
But a little
Thank you.
late start, so I only have a few more minutes. How does skin-to-skin contact affect brain development? When a baby's in skin-to-skin contact with mother or father, nerve impulses travel to the brain that activate the amygdala via the prefrontal orbital pathway, thus supporting the maturation of this important part of the brain. The amygdala, of course, is part of the limbic system that is involved with emotional learning, memory modulation, and activation of the sympathetic nervous system. Dr. Alan Shore, a neurobiologist at UCLA who studies infant brain development, says that areas of the amygdala are in a critical period of maturation in the first 2 months after birth, and therefore in early postnatal life, tactile input is critically important for normal brain maturation. Dr. Shore and others have determined that attachment relationships are formative partly because they facilitate development of the newborn brain's self-regulatory mechanism. And we know that at first mother is the baby's regulator and helps to modulate their environment. Shroff contends that this regulatory mechanism of mother-infant interaction, which begins immediately after birth, is a promoter of the development of synaptic connection during the establishment of functional brain circuits. And this may be how babies are meant to learn self-regulation. He maintains that early interpersonal events, such as that happen immediately after birth, can positively and negatively impact not just brain function, but actively impacts the structural organization of the brain. It's like the brain is designed to be sculpted into its final configuration by these early experiences, and they are embedded in attachment relationships. When a baby and mother interact and communicate with eye-to-eye contact and touching and vocalizing, this is not just a nice interaction. This is active brain development, the process of creating synaptic connections and helping to maintain the baby's homeostasis. So the bottom line is whatever supports mother-infant attachment supports infant brain development, and skin-to-skin contact beginning in the first hour after birth or anytime after that does both. So placing the newborn skin to skin with mother immediately after birth is not just a nice way to say, "Happy birthday, little one, welcome to our world." This first hour after birth is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime experience, a sacred time. Something priceless happens during those first moments together when connectedness and trust are first experienced outside the womb. What impacts do immediate postpartum care practices have on the psyche of mother and child? The human psyche begins to develop well before birth, and because the unborn baby is conscious and aware and having its own experiences, and because the unborn baby is hearing and seeing and feeling and learning and remembering, what happens immediately after birth has a huge impact on the baby's first impressions of life outside the womb. A baby's prenatal and birth experiences can influence a baby's perception about the question, is this world a safe place? We know that a healthy womb lays the foundation for a healthy world, and our goal for every new little human being who comes into a world is to support a peaceful pregnancy with a growing emotional connection between mother and her unborn baby, a gentle, welcoming birth with uninterrupted physical and emotional connection between mother and her newly born baby, development of a strong bond and secure attachment between the parents and their growing child, who will more likely grow up to be a compassionate adult with good mental health who can find peaceful solutions to our world's challenges. Suzanne Arms, as we all know and love, says, if we hope to create a nonviolent world where respect and kindness replace fear and hatred, we must begin with how we treat each other at the beginning of life, for that is where our deepest patterns are set. From these roots grow fear and alienation or love and trust. How a baby is welcomed into the world matters. It matters a great deal, and it is our responsibility, our privilege, and our joy to do everything we can to make every baby's entrance into the world and first experiences outside the womb as welcoming as possible. So I want to thank everyone here for doing all you can to make this reality for every baby within our sphere of influence. Thank you.